Away the 4 victories over the Chicago Sky, this team is 14-14. But it's a blessing in disguise, is it not? It's a blessing in disguise that Caitlin Clark's been out, because we've been able to figure out how to play as a team. You do realize you can win a championship with Caitlin Clark leading the charge? Question mark?
Stephanie White might want to schedule that instant regret appointment now, because after the Fevers went over Chicago Sky, she somehow managed to turn a routine post-game chat into a full-blown Caitlin Clark snub. And it's not the first time. Question for you. How many more of these team-first speeches before the Fever's real star checks out?
He's wide open for a 3. Felt like they got robbed. Caitlin Clark booing the timeout.
Let's just get the scoreboard out of the way. The Fever beat the Chicago Sky. And yeah, that sounds impressive until you realize Chicago's season is basically a glorified "how bad can it get" documentary. This is the same Sky squad that's been missing Angel Reese with back injury and whose offensive firepower could barely light a match.
Coach, you guys have had a lot of success, more success than anyone without their star player. How have you guys been able to stick together without having Caitlin on the floor?
I think first and foremost, we got a great group of women. You know, they're team first. They pull for one another. They're selfless, and they're capable. And you know, when you have that, it just they've been resilient all year long, and they rally together. They're a connected group, and I think that's really important. And we have capable players.
But hey, a win's a win, right? Unless you're Stephanie White, in which case it's apparently an opportunity to remind the world that your transcendent, game-changing, ticket-selling, ratings-boosting second-year star, Caitlin Clark, isn't the centerpiece of your team. Nope. Instead, we got the classic. It's not about you, coach speak, delivered with enough shade to make a solar eclipse jealous. Her exact words. When you love who you come to work with every day, when it's not about you, it's about everybody else and it's about the whole, it makes it worth it. Now, if you're reading that as a heartfelt team bonding moment, congratulations. You've never sat through an entire WNBA season watching a coach struggle to handle a superstar.
Confidence that each one of these women has gotten in the ability to make plays in big moments, the depth that we have, so that you really never can key on one or two players. We've got multiple players that can step up and have big games for us. I think it makes us more balanced on the offensive end, and the versatility that we have defensively has been big for us. And so, you know, I think this group's been resilient. They've come together. You know, they're playing really well together, and they play for each other, and you really can't discount how important that is when you're playing for the person beside you.
Because here's the thing, context matters. This is the same Stephanie White who called Caitlin Clark's injury a blessing in disguise. A blessing as in, hey, the best player we've had in decades being sidelined is somehow a positive. That's not basketball strategy. That's spin doctoring. Now, let's be clear here. Caitlin Clark isn't some overhyped rookie, still figuring out how to run a professional offense. This is year 2. She's been breaking viewership records, selling out arenas, and dragging the Fever from irrelevant to the national conversation. The WNBA desperately needs stars like her, and every other major sports league knows it. Look at the NBA. When Magic Johnson came in, they built around him. Michael Jordan built around him. Steph Curry, same story. But with Caitlin, we get the strange. We don't want one player to be bigger than the team energy. Newsflash. That's exactly how you kill momentum.
4 games in a row, looking for number 5. What has that been, that thing?
I mean, I think a couple things. You know, I don't know that I feel like we've been consistent, but you know, being able to consistently string wins together. I think defensively, when we're disruptive, when our attention to detail is high, you know, we make things difficult for opponents. And in those moments where we, like last game, for example, have high turnovers, we were still able to get stops, and we've got to be able to continue to be able to do that. Or in the moments where we're having trouble offensively, we can rely on our defense, and defense travels. So that's number 1. Number 2, I think the way that we've been moving the ball. You know, we've had a high assist rate. We've been able to play inline to inline to get to second and third actions. The ball's been finding the right shot on the floor, and that's important for us. We got to make defenses work. We've got to play inline to inline. We can't let the ball get stuck. That's when we're at our best, and I think we've really begun to find that connectivity on both ends.
And it's not like Caitlin hasn't already proven she can run an offense. She's led comebacks, threaded impossible passes, and hit daggers that sent crowds into chaos. The Fever's ceiling without her? Maybe a scrappy playoff appearance, if everything breaks right. With her, you're talking legitimate championship windows in a league where dynasties are rare.
Different with CC playing, but what did you take away from that one that you're looking to replicate again and also adjust?
Yeah, I mean, Seattle's a really good team, and we've got to make sure our attention to detail from a personnel standpoint is high. We can't allow their players to get to their comfort zones. We've got to make them hit tough shots, and we got to live with those tough shots. And they're a really solid defensive team. I mean, they're high level on the defensive end of the floor, so we've got to be patient. We've got to make sure that we understand what we're looking for on the offensive end of the floor. We can't over-penetrate. We've got to allow the ball, again, to find the right shot. But our passes have to be on time, on target, because they make you pay if they don't. They've got great length. They've got great athleticism. And they come at you from a lot of different angles. So we've got to do a good job of making sure that our attention to detail on both ends is there.
So why the cold shoulder? Some say it's just coach personality. Stephanie White likes to keep everyone level-headed. Others think it's politics. The WNBA's obsession with promoting the whole league instead of leaning fully into its megastars. And some fans aren't shy about bringing up the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the race narrative creeps in.
Concludes. Not lost on any of the power brokers in the game. Both of these up-and-coming players are Black. And in a game built by Black women, it matters that the faces of the future look like the faces of the past. She's openly saying, I'm really glad Caitlin Clark, I made that mistake, is moving on because she's white. And it's pissing me off that we don't have a black face as the star of women's basketball because of faces of the past. How insane is this? What if white people took this attitude in, I don't know, baseball or lacrosse? You could go down the list. This is so offensive. Yeah. And her disgusting racism against her own race will be given a total...
Let's not pretend it's off limits. We've all seen the commentary. Caitlin's getting too much attention. Other players deserve equal shine. She's only popular because fill in the blank. The point is, every second that's spent diminishing her is a second wasted in building the Fever into what they could be. And here's where sarcasm writes itself. Stephanie White's team-first approach against the Sky would be inspiring if the Sky weren't one of the weakest rosters in the league right now. You don't need a masterclass in selflessness to beat them. You need competent execution, and maybe a few made threes which, by the way, Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hull provided in buckets. Hull finally found her stroke, going 4 for 6 from deep. Cunningham dropped 3 triples herself. Kelsey Mitchell was steady as ever with her scoring, and, surprise, dishing out 8 assists. IT was a balance win, sure, but make no mistake. Against any top-tier team, that balance win collapses without Clark's playmaking create those open looks to SO when Stephanie steps to the mic and basically says, it's better when it's not about you. It's hard not to read between the lines. This isn't about balance. This is about control. Coaching a superstar means seeding some spotlight, adjusting your schemes, and admitting that sometimes your best path to winning is to let the best player cook. And that's where we hit the real friction. Caitlin's style is bold. Deep threes, fast tempo, threading passes into tight spaces. It's the kind of basketball that sells, but it's also the kind that doesn't always fit into rigid playbooks. And Stephanie White, she's a playbook coach. She likes structure, systems, predictability, which is fine until you have a once-in-a-generation talent. Then your job shifts. You adapt to them, not the other way around. The NBA learned this decades ago. You don't ask Allen Iverson to slow down and become a pass-first guard. You don't tell Shaq to start taking mid-range jumpers because it fits the system. You maximize what they do best and fill in the gaps with the right supporting cast. But here's what really fuels the frustration for Fever fans. It's the wasted potential. Right now, Caitlin Clark could be leading a team built around her skill set. Surround her with consistent shooters. Give her the freedom to push pace and let her run the offense like she did at Iowa. That's a championship-caliber recipe. Instead, we're getting blessing in disguise sound bites and post-game quotes that sound like subtle digs. It's like buying a Ferrari and then insisting it should drive like a compact sedan because that's how the rest of the garage works. And while we're on the subject of subtle digs, let's not forget this was an isolated slip. The blessing in disguise comment came earlier this season. There was also that awkward moment where the Fever's social media highlighted team chemistry in Clark's absence, as if her being out was somehow liberating. It's a strange look for a franchise that should be riding the Caitlin wave for all it's worth. The optics matter, too. Fans notice. Media notices. And in today's sports landscape, where narratives travel faster than actual game highlights, the perception that your coach isn't fully backing your star is dangerous. Because here's the nightmare scenario. Caitlin Clark gets fed up. She's already proven she can draw crowds anywhere. Put her in a bigger market or on a team that actually builds around her, and suddenly the Fever are right back to being an afterthought. And if you think that impossible, just remember how quickly franchises have unraveled in other leagues when stars wanted out. The Fever have something the WNBA desperately needs. A player who can pull in casual fans, boost TV ratings, and get people talking about the league in the offseason. That's marketing gold. Squander it, and you don't just hurt your own team. You hurt the entire league's growth curve. But hey, maybe I'm just reading too much into it. Maybe Stephanie White's comments were just clumsy phrasing. Maybe she really does believe Caitlin is the future, but doesn't want to put too much pressure on her. Sure, let's go with that. And maybe the Sky are secretly title contenders in disguise. Spoiler, they're not. And the fact that this conversation is even happening after a win tells you everything. This wasn't a hard-fought playoff victory over the Liberty or the Aces. This was beating up on a struggling Chicago team that frankly should have been blown out from the opening tip. The fact that the game was even close for stretches is a red flag in itself, which brings us to the bigger question. If this is how Stephanie White handles easy wins, what happens when the playoffs roll around and every possession matters? Will Caitlin get the keys to the offense? Or will we get more balanced game plans that put the ball in the hands of players less equipped to create under pressure? Now, if you thought part one was just nitpicking, let's talk about what happened after those comments went public. Because the reaction wasn't exactly a standing ovation for Stephanie White. The Fever fan base wasn't buying it. Social media lit up with takes ranging from "this is shade" toward Caitlin to "we need a new coach before we waste another year." And you can't dismiss it as overreaction when even neutral WNBA watchers, people who aren't even diehard Fever fans, were saying the quiet part out loud. This sounded personal. And here's where comparison game starts. In other leagues, coaches bend over backwards to protect and promote their stars. Phil Jackson didn't go on TV minimizing Michael Jordan's importance to the Bulls. Steve Kerr never told the media, it's not about Steph Curry, right after he carried Golden State to another big win. But in Indiana, it's as if there's this unwritten rule. Never let Caitlin Clark get too much credit. You can feel in the way post-game quotes are framed and how the offense sometimes feels intentionally muted when she's on the floor. It's almost as if the goal is to prove the team can win without her. Except, well, history says otherwise. Because here's the reality. When Clark sits, the Fever's offensive rating plummets. The ball movement slows, the spacing collapses, and opponents start clogging the paint because they're not worried about 28-foot daggers being launched over their heads. That's not an insult to the rest of the roster. It's just the truth of having a player who warps defenses by existing that SO. When Stephanie White gives a speech about loving the group and making it not about you, it raises an eyebrow. Especially when that you is the most impactful player in franchise history since Tamika. Catchings. And unlike Catchings, Clark arrived with a built-in national audience, something you can't manufacture. Now, let's hit on the money side of this for a second. The Fever are sitting on a marketing gold mine. Clark jerseys flying off the shelves. Road games, sellouts, national TV slots. You better believe the networks want her on screen. That's millions in long-term value for the franchise. And yet, here we are, letting a coach publicly downplay her role. It's the kind of short-sighted move that, in business terms, is like having a celebrity brand ambassador and refusing to put them in your commercials because you don't want it to be about one person. Congratulations. You just turned free publicity into wasted potential. And you know who's watching all this? Other teams. Don't think for a second that GMs in larger markets aren't making mental notes about Clark's situation. If Indiana doesn't want her to be the face, we will. That's how the NBA turned Shaq's Orlando exit into the Lakers dynasty. That's how Kevin Garnett went from a Minnesota icon to a Boston champion. The WNBA may not have that level of player movement yet, but it's coming. And if Caitlin ever starts feeling like she's being held back, she's not without options. Now, about that blessing in disguise comment from earlier in the year, it aged about as well as unrefrigerated milk. The idea that losing Clark to injury somehow helped the team develop chemistry is one of those statements that sounds nice in theory, but falls apart under scrutiny. Sure, the Fever might have had to learn to share the scoring load, but guess what? They weren't exactly running the table without her. In fact, those games expose exactly why she's so valuable. Without her gravity, defenses could stay home on shooters, which meant those open looks we saw against Chicago weren't there against real contenders. That's not team development. That's survival mode. And here's where the instant regret part of the title comes in. Stephanie White probably thought her post-game remarks would be seen as uplifting, as a look how tight-knit we are moment. Instead, they're being dissected, criticized, and, worst of all for a coach, remembered, because fans have receipts now. Every time the Fever lose a close game where Clark doesn't get enough touches in crunch time, this quote is going to resurface. Every time the offense looks disjointed, someone's going to say, "Remember when she said it's not about Caitlin?" And in a league where public perception can turn fast, that's a dangerous cloud to have hanging overhead. Meanwhile, Clark herself hasn't publicly fired back, which is exactly what makes this situation so uncomfortable. She's professional, she's marketable, and she's already been dealing with physical targeting from defenders all year. She's not going to throw her coach under the bus mid-season. But make no mistake, players notice these things. If you don't believe that, just look at how other superstars in sports have reacted in similar situations. Aaron Rodgers never forgot when the Packers front office made public comments that minimized his role. LeBron James has famously moved teams when he felt management didn't have his back. Tom Brady left New England partly because he felt underappreciated despite all the rings. That's the territory Indiana's walking into. Now, to the woke agenda piece that some fans keep bringing up. Whether you buy into that framing or not, the perception is there that Clark's popularity makes certain corners of the WNBA uneasy, that her visibility somehow takes away from other narratives the league wants to push. And instead of embracing her as the league's best marketing tool, there's this awkward balancing act where every compliment comes with qualifier. "Oh, she's great, but," or "Oh, she's talented, but." You don't hear that when other stars get hyped. Aya Wilson is rightfully praised without hesitation. Breanna Stewart gets her flowers. But with Clark, there's always a but. And when your own coach starts sounding like she's adding to that chorus, it's a problem. Let's also not ignore the on-court numbers. Clark leads the team in assists by a mile, ranks near the top in scoring, and has a plus-minus that swings dramatically when she's off the court. Those aren't opinions. Those are facts. So, when Stephanie White decides to frame the win over Chicago as a triumph of everyone else, it's hard not to see it as diminishing the one player who actually changes the math of this team. And speaking of math, the Fever's path to a championship is not a mystery. It's not going to be through a perfectly balanced box score where everyone gets exactly 10 points. It's going to be through maximizing Clark's unique abilities, surrounding her with shooters, and letting her control the pace. That's how you beat teams like the Liberty and the Aces. That's how you turn sellouts into playoff runs, and playoff runs into banners. Anything less, and you're just treading water to SO. Here's the question Stephanie White has to answer. Not to the media, not even the fans, but to herself. Is this about proving a point, or is this about winning? Because those two goals are starting to look mutually exclusive. If she doubles down on this, it's not about your approach. The Fever might still squeak into the playoffs, but they won't scare anyone. If she embraces the reality that Caitlin Clark is the engine, the ticket, and the headline, suddenly Indiana becomes a nightmare matchup for anyone. And here's the kicker. There's still time to fix this. Publicly, White could start leaning into Clark's leadership. Privately, she could design sets that put the ball in her hands more often in crunch time. The narrative could shift from snubbing to supporting in a matter of weeks. But if it doesn't, if this tension keeps simmering, that's when the real regret sets in. Because the generational talent doesn't wait around forever, and the Fever's window to both win and grow their brand is open right now. Stephanie White might think she's protecting the team culture. What she's really doing is risking the team's future. SO, what's it going to be, Indiana? Keep pretending you can win big while keeping Caitlin Clark in a box. Or finally unleash her and watch the Fever become must-see basketball. Drop your thoughts below. Is Stephanie White holding this team back, or is there still time to turn it around?